Hi everyone, a lot of you may know me by my composer moniker JummBox. You may also know that I'm the developer of a beatbox mod called JummBox, and despite the silly name, it's got a pretty practical purpose, which is basically just to improve on the usability of the tool and also expand the options available to composers. So anyway, I've been making a few updates recently and I wanted to roll them all into a 2.0 release. And some of the features are a little complex, so I figured I'd release an overview/tutorial video alongside it. So let's get right into it. You should be able to see the outline on your screen now, and timestamp links will be in the description below. And by the way, this video is going to assume you're at least cursorily familiar with Beatbox. If you're not, check the link to the original Beatbox below. You can read the page to get a bit more info. Alright, let's get started with some new features. So first up, just a few immediate visual differences you'll see. The mute buttons now look a little different. They still work the same, but they show the channel number next to them now. And that resets at noise channels, which is why that restarts at 1 there. This will be useful for a feature I'll talk about later. Next up, the piano now shows the octave number next to the tonic, so C2, C3, C4. This is the same as the conventional numbering you'll see just about everywhere, so you can use that to tell exactly what pitch you're playing. And lastly here, the octave scroll bar now goes 1 octave higher. The highest note you could lay in Beatbox and JummBox before this point was C7. You can now go up to C8, so that means you can just make things go a little higher, which is nice. So next up, let's talk about layouts. Beatbox recently added a full screen layout that I'm really a fan of. I just took that, added it in, and added in a few other options too. So if you go into Preferences, Set Layout, this pop-up shows up now. There are 3 options in the drop-down here for different layouts. Normal layout's the one we're on, it's the one everyone's familiar with. Full screen layout is the Beatbox full screen layout, and then I added this wide full screen layout. And the difference between this and the Beatbox full screen layout is that the track editor is placed into its own vertical space. This can be useful if you have a large channel count in your song. So with the Beatbox full screen layout, it works pretty well on smaller channel counts, but as the channel count gets larger, let's say we had 30 pitch channels here, this space gets really compressed and you may even get a scroll bar in your track editor as it gets too large. With the wide full screen layout, that all fits into one screen still. And the last thing I haven't talked about here yet in this layout pop-up is this extra view octave setting. It goes from 0 to 2, and it does basically what it says. It allows you to see up to 2 extra octaves in your pattern editor. So this works on all the layouts, but your mileage may vary based on your screen size and settings. So just use whatever works best for you. For me personally, I'm going to be using the wide full screen with 2 extra octaves for the rest of this video, as that's my most comfortable setup. And a quick one, Beatbox added an option between a light and a dark theme. I moved it out to this pop-up here where you can select between multiple, so I have all the Beatbox themes in there, so you can make it look similar to Beatbox. I obviously have the JummBox theme, and then I just added a few more as well. And another quick thing, the file export song pop-up now shows how long your song will be, so you don't have to actually export it to see the length, and that'll update based on your settings here too. So last little feature here before we talk about the final feature, which will take up the rest of the video. I've added a Detune slider. It works basically like you'd expect, so let's lay a note. And then let's play with the Detune. And that's about it. Let's move on to modulators. So first things first, let me explain what modulators are. Have you ever been working on a song and while you were playing it, you dragged a slider? And you kind of liked the sound and you wanted that effect to go in your final song? Well, basically modulators are a way to affect your sliders for you automatically while the song plays. So you can find them as a new type of channel. So if we go in the channel settings, you can have up to 8 modulator channels, but we'll just start with 1. They show up at the bottom of the track editor just below the noise channels, and they have a different colored mute button to indicate that they are a different type of channel because they do not work at all like pitch or noise channels. Alright, so let's take a look at our mod channel. There are 6 rows in every mod channel. That means you have 6 modulators to work with. We're going to just start with 1 modulator. Each modulator is completely independent of the rest. So let's look at the top one here. On the sidebar, it says the modulator is not set, and this is modulator number 1. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on the right, for the settings, there are 6 drop downs that you can select from. So let's try this. You have options for which channel you want to affect. So let's try affecting pitch 1, where we have already a note laid. And then you get settings that you can use on that channel. So for example, earlier we messed with the pulse width of pitch 1. Let's make our modulator do that for us. So with that set up, now we have to lay a note in the modulator row. And here, now we've just tied the pulse width of pitch 1 to the volume of this note. So for example, we're going from pulse width 50, which is a square wave, down to 0, which is inaudible, but it'll get very narrow as we get to 0, and then back to 50. And then let's just put this modulator in every pattern and play it. Okay. So that was a quick rundown to demonstrate what modulators can do, but now let's circle back to some of the things I didn't exactly mention that you might have noticed. So just watch the pulse width slider again here. That little purple dot matches the modulator value at the current time, so you can see what your modulators are doing, and that affects every slider. Next up, you might have noticed that this little modulator sidebar here changed what it said when I changed these drop downs here. And also the indicator here in the corner lit up. That just shows that this modulator is being used. So these other 5 modulators here, we haven't set anything for, they don't do anything. Even if you lay notes in them, these notes aren't tied to anything. So a couple of other strange things you may have noticed just then. I was able to lay a note and change its volume without affecting the note above it. So modulators don't work like beatbox chords where they all have to have the same volume at the same time. You can, specify different timings for your notes, and they're completely independent. You may also have seen this little gray label that's following the mouse. That shows where your control points are. It'll hover over them, and then when you're dragging, it'll show you what value you're dragging to. So for pulse width here, you can drag precisely to 25, and then you'll know you're hitting that exactly. And speaking of dragging, it does work a little differently for this modulator channel than it does for normal beatbox notes. So you actually click on the note to change its volume. And there's no way to change pitch bend, obviously, because these aren't pitches. There's just 6 rows of settings. So let's try to do something with this second modulator here. So go to the modulator 2 row. Let's set it for pitch 1 again. Then let's go for volume. And right away you'll notice that the scaling on the note just changed. And that's because for every modulator setting, there's a different maximum value. So volume goes from -25 to 25. An unset modulator just has a default maximum of 6. Panning, 0 to 50. So when you play with these settings, the scaling of your notes may change. Anyway, for volume, let's just try having our note start out at even volume, which is 0, so it'll be whatever volume it normally is. And let's have it get quieter over a very short period of time. So let's play that and watch the volume slider. So the thing I wanted to highlight there is the fact that if you stop specifying modulator values here, like we've done at this point, it'll just keep whatever the last value was. So that's important to keep in mind. You can ramp up your volume with something and then just let it ride for an entire part if you want to. So there's also something a little strange about the volume indicator versus the pulse width indicator. Look carefully here. So the volume indicator was a little bit round, and while the pulse width indicator was square. Now they're both showing you where the modulator is at, but the difference is that the rounded indicator for volume doesn't overwrite the volume slider entirely, it works with it. So for example, if I let it play and manipulate the volume slider, I still have some control. Whereas if I try that with the pulse width slider, I'm going to be fighting it. And you can see I really didn't have much control there, and that's because any square modulators are actually overwriting the value of the slider. They're replacing it with the modulator value. Whereas any rounded sliders, which are usually used for volumes, are actually multiplying the base value of the slider with whatever your modulator is doing. So you can move up your base volume of your instrument. Even if you're doing tons of modulation, your instrument will get louder everywhere. So that's probably enough for just an overview. You can figure out more on your own by messing with it, but I would like to give a quick overview on every single modulator option that's available and any quirks or tips and tricks or ways they can be used. So let's get into that. Alright, we're going to start out with the song-wide modulators. So you just select the channel song, and now you can apply settings to your entire song from one modulator. So we'll start with song volume, which is pretty straightforward. And this is one of those modulators that you still have control of this slider for. So if you give this to someone, they can still change the overall volume of the song by playing with this slider. It doesn't get in the way. So here's just a demonstration of it. So I think this is a really powerful slider for fading in songs or fading out songs. You might even find some use in the middle of a song. Now let's move on to song tempo. And let's just try it on the exact same song and see what we get. So while it didn't sound as good as the fade in, you can imagine that tempo is an incredibly powerful tool. You can use it for momentary slowdowns in your song or just to change the tempo abruptly mid-song. And it's really good at fading out right at the end of a song where everything slows down. You also might be able to get a kind of swing sound by alternating tempo rapidly between beats. I haven't looked into this, but I would love to see someone try. Next is reverb. It affects the overall song reverb just like you're moving this slider. Be aware though that you do have to have the reverb effect turned on for an instrument for this to do anything at all. So let's give it a try here. That's pretty nice. And last of the song modulators is the mysterious next bar modulator. Now this is a lot less complicated than it seems. The first thing you need to know is that the value of the modulator doesn't matter at all, 0 or 1, but where you place it matters. So I'll just play it like this with the next bar modulator starting here, and let's see what happens. And let's just fill it all out with this pattern throughout the entire song. So wherever you have a next bar modulator, wherever the start of it is, the length doesn't matter, the playhead will immediately skip to the next bar. So that's the meaning of this name, and again, it doesn't matter what the value of your modulator is, but just wherever you place the start of the note, that is then the start of the next bar immediately. So the point of this isn't just to amuse yourself, although that's always a plus. By laying these modulators in a specific location in a bar, you can get different bar lengths. For example, if you lay it near the start, you get one extra beat that you can tack on anywhere in your song, or if you lay it near the end, you're effectively cutting a beat out of a bar. And this can let you get mixed meter songs or a quick one beat fill in the middle of your song really easily. So next up are instrument settings, and let's talk about volume first. We've already covered this a little bit, but I would just like to point out how useful it is for kind of doing fades. For example, in JummBox and Beatbox prior, you'd have to manually fade the note volume out, and that could be very tedious for long fades. Now you just have to set the modulators at a few points and it'll do it for you. Let's listen to that. So that's handy. Next up, let's just add another setting to pitch 1. You can have obviously as many modulators on one channel as you want. Let's go for pan. Now this is one of my favorite features. You're going to have headphones to hear anything here, but it really does have a big effect when you do have headphones. So let's pan from full left to full right to full left over one bar. And you could see both the modulators doing their work there. So yeah, this has a really neat effect. And another thing worth pointing out is if you move your panning pretty quickly, maybe even faster than this, it kind of has a different effect, almost like a phaser effect, and it's a really nice effect. Let's listen to that. So I'm a fan of that as well. Alright, let's keep adding things to this. Let's play with filter cut and filter peak next. So these two together, obviously they're these two sliders, you can really change the sound of your instrument. So a higher filter cut generally means it's shriller and cleaner, and a lower value is usually softer and more muddy. And then filter peak kind of plays with how strong filter cut is, and I think it also has something to do with the volume based on pitch, but mostly it's something I just go by feel for. So with filter cut, you can generally hear it pretty strongly. So you could hear it getting shriller there, and then filter peak maybe a little more subtle. But by playing with the combination of the two, you can get a pretty unique sound. Next up, let's talk about Detune. So, as we know, Detune can be used to get kind of notes in between the pitches. That means you can get something really dissonant sounding really quickly. So, my apologies if this sounds pretty bad, but I'm just going to try something random here. A little strange, but I guess it could have been worse. And that does it for this instrument. Now this is a basic square wave, but actually there are more sliders available based on your instrument. Earlier we were on a pulse width instrument, and when we went back to the modulators and we set pitch 1, we saw pulse width show up there. So we've already covered pulse width in a lot of depth, but we'll just try it here. Pretty nice. So just keep that in mind though. Based on what instrument you have, you're going to get different modulator options for your channel. Alright, and then the last modulators are hiding away in the FM instruments because there are all these FM sliders to play with. So let's get rid of some of these. And let's try some FM stuff. So you can set the FM sliders, and they work like volume sliders. So they are going to be multiplied with whatever the FM slider is at. So if you want to get the full range of FM with a modulator, you're going to just want to keep that FM slider at max. Now this is going to be pretty boring if we just set FM slider 1, because that is just tied to the FM instruments volume. So let's just try changing that to something more interesting. Let's see what we get here. It still affected the volume a bit, but it was a pretty neat effect. And obviously you can change any FM slider's value, so you'll probably get a similar effect with FM slider 2 here. Okay, and then you can obviously also change FM feedback. So right now the multiplication here will only cause FM feedback to kind of slightly work. Let's listen to that. But then if you move this all the way up, the amplification effect is much stronger. So anyway, just by playing with a few modulators at a time, you can get a really unique sound really quickly and make some effects that just weren't practical to do before. You may also save yourself some time by not needing to do manual volume fades and that sort of thing anymore. So yeah, I hope all my explanations made sense, and I'm excited to see what people can do with the new features. If you have any questions or if you find a bug, feel free to message me on Discord, find me on Twitter, or just reply to this video. But anyway, I've gone on too long now. Quick shout out to John Nesky for his continued support for Beatbox and the community. And yeah, have fun out there. Thanks for watching.